It was a scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The image of Michael standing at the edge of the altar, looking at her with a coldness that pierced through the very core of her being. He had promised her forever, or so she thought. They had been the perfect couple, or at least that's how it had seemed. From the moment they met, it was like the universe had conspired to bring them together. He was everything she had ever dreamed of. A man with ambition, charm, and a smile that could melt the hardest of hearts. And she? She was young, in love, and full of hope. She was certain that this moment, their wedding day, would be the beginning of something beautiful, something everlasting. But what she didn't know was that this day, her special day, would be the one that shattered her heart beyond repair. The church was decorated with white lilies, the air thick with the scent of flowers and anticipation. The guests were seated, and the sound of a distant piano played softly in the background as Ava stood behind the curtains waiting for her cue. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, a deafening rhythm that made her question if everything was truly real. But she was too caught up in the whirlwind of love, too blinded by the excitement of the life that awaited her. She had no reason to think anything would go wrong. This was her moment. Her dream was about to come true. Then as she stepped into the church, her eyes met Michael's. For a split second, the world seemed to slow. There he was waiting for her at the altar, dressed in the suit she had helped him pick out. He looked handsome. His hair tousled just the way she liked it, his expression filled with love and admiration. She smiled, feeling her stomach flutter, as she took slow steps toward him, the promise of forever burning brightly in her chest. But as she drew closer, something changed. His eyes, once filled with warmth, suddenly turned cold. The smile that had once captivated her began to fade, replaced by an unreadable expression. Ava's heart skipped a beat, her smile faltering. Was she imagining it? No. There it was again. A flicker of doubt, a silent warning, something she couldn't put her finger on. And then when she reached the altar, when she stood in front of him, ready to say those sacred words, she saw it clearly. A deep, unspoken hesitation that gripped his features. Ava's heart clenched painfully in her chest. What was happening? This wasn't what she had envisioned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. But before she could voice her concerns, the words left his lips, words she never expected to hear. "I can't do this," Michael said, his voice barely audible, but enough to send shockwaves through the church. Ava blinked in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. "What do you mean you can't do this?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. The room seemed to close in on her, the air thick and suffocating. Her stomach turned, and her mind raced as she tried to understand. But Michael just shook his head, his face void of any emotion. "I'm sorry, Ava. This isn't right. I can't marry you." The silence that followed was deafening. It felt like the entire world had come to a halt. The music, the laughter, the joy, everything vanished in an instant. Time stood still. And in that frozen moment, Ava's world crumbled around her. She didn't understand. How could he do this? How could he leave her like this, standing at the altar exposed to the scrutiny of their friends and family? How could he walk away after everything they had shared, the plans, the dreams, the life they had talked about building together? There was no explanation, no apology, just those simple, devastating words. "I can't do this." It wasn't just a rejection. It was a betrayal. It was everything she feared, everything she had worked so hard to protect, shattered in an instant. And the worst part? It wasn't just her heart that was broken. It was her future, her family, everything she had envisioned for herself. She couldn't even look at him. She turned away, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath shallow and uneven. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't let anyone see them. She couldn't. She was too embarrassed, too humiliated. She was standing in front of everyone, the woman who had been left at the altar, the woman who had been abandoned by the man she had given her heart to. And then, without another word, Michael turned and walked away. He left her there, standing alone in front of everyone. He walked out of the church, out of her life, leaving her with nothing but the ghost of a promise and the haunting question of what went wrong. What had she done to deserve this? Ava didn't know how she survived the days, weeks, and months that followed that day. The shame of it weighed heavily on her, like a dark cloud that refused to lift. She couldn't even go back to the life she had known. Every corner of her apartment, every familiar street, every shared memory with Michael now felt tainted. How Could she move on from this? How could she possibly trust again? But she did. Ava threw herself into her work, into her passion for dance and teaching. She opened her own dance studio and became known for her strength, her resilience. She built a life for herself, a life that was hers and hers alone. But there was always something missing. A part of her, the part that had loved so deeply, had never fully healed. And as time passed, she buried that pain deep inside, never speaking of Michael again, never allowing herself to dwell on the past. It was easier this way. Easier to forget about the man who had promised her everything only to rip it all away. Easier to raise her 2 sons, Ethan and Jacob, without him. After all, they had never known him. He wasn't a part of their lives. And for Ava, that was a small comfort, a way to protect herself from the pain that lingered. But deep down, she wondered if she would ever find peace. Would she ever trust again? Would she ever allow someone else into her heart? The answer she knew was complicated. And yet life had a funny way of making sure the past never stayed buried for long. 10 years passed. 10 long years of healing, of growth, of learning how to love herself again. And just when Ava thought she had finally moved on, life threw her an unexpected curveball. She was standing in the produce aisle of a grocery store one quiet Saturday afternoon when she saw him, Michael. The shock was immediate. Her heart stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked the same but different. Older. Wiser. There was a certain weariness in his eyes, a depth she hadn't seen before. But there he was in the same grocery store, standing just a few feet away from her. For a moment, Ava didn't know what to do. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the years of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak had all caught up with her in this one fleeting moment. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her. What was he doing here? Why now after all these years? Then, as if on cue, their eyes met. Michael froze. His expression morphed from surprise to guilt, from guilt to longing. And in that instant, Ava knew that the man who had walked away from her was now standing before her, asking for something she wasn't sure she could ever give again. Another chance. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with memories of a love lost. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but Ava didn't want to hear it. She couldn't. The years of pain, of disappointment came rushing back in a flood. How dare he show up now? How could he expect her to forgive him? To forget everything? But there was something different about him. Something genuine in the way he looked at her. Something she hadn't expected. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he was sorry. The question hung in the air like a bitter promise. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever love him again? Ava didn't know. But one thing was for sure, this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. The tension in the air was palpable as Ava stared at Michael standing across from her in the grocery store aisle. She couldn't bring herself to believe that this was happening. After 10 years of silence, after everything she had gone through, here he was again. Michael, the man who had once been the center of her world. He had left her at the altar, abandoned her when she needed him most, and now, after all this time, he expected her to listen to whatever explanation he had. The nerve of him. Her heart raced, her palms began to sweat, and her stomach churned as old feelings surfaced. Anger, betrayal, and disbelief filled her. She hadn't seen him in years, and yet it felt as if no time had passed. He was still as handsome as ever, his chiseled jawline, the same intensity in his eyes, but now, there was something different. Something that made her question if this moment had been orchestrated by fate, or if it was some cruel joke the universe had played on her. She glanced at him, her lips tight, her eyes narrowing. There were so many things she wanted to say, so many years of hurt and confusion she had buried deep inside. And now, seeing him standing before her like nothing had changed, like he hadn't crushed her heart, it felt like the wounds he had left were freshly reopened. "Michael, what the hell are you doing here?" she finally managed to say, her voice shaking with emotion. He flinched at her words, but it didn't seem to deter him. He stepped closer, his face etched with regret and something else she couldn't quite place. She was prepared to hate him. She had been for so long. But then, in the depth of his eyes, she saw it. The remorse. The genuine, soul-deep regret that only someone who had truly lived with the weight of their choices could wear. "I know this is out of nowhere," Michael began, his voice low and apologetic. "But I had to see you. I couldn't let you walk away from me again without at least explaining." "Explain." Ava's voice caught and she tried to keep the venom in her words, but it was harder than she had expected. She had moved on. She had built a life without him, a life that was full of purpose and meaning. But now, here he was, making her question everything she had worked so hard for. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ava," he continued, his words steady but filled with an emotion that was almost too much to bear. "I was stupid. I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. Until I lost you." Ava could feel the walls she had carefully constructed around her heart start to crack just a little. She hated that. She hated that after everything, Michael could still do this to her. She had spent so many sleepless nights crying over his betrayal. So many years of questioning herself, wondering what she could have done differently, why she hadn't seen the signs. And now here he was, standing before her with a look of guilt so raw, so genuine, it felt like a punch to her chest. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Michael," Ava said, her voice trembling as she fought to keep the tears at bay. "You left me at the altar. You destroyed everything we had, everything I thought we were going to be. And now you think you can just waltz back into my life and pretend like nothing happened?" Michael looked down at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. He looked like he was struggling, wrestling with something deep inside him. And for the first time, Ava wasn't sure if she wanted to know what it was. She didn't know if she could handle the truth, whatever it might be. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice almost breaking. "I don't even know if I deserve it. But I can't live with the fact that I left you, that I walked away from the woman I love more than anything. I was a coward, and I've been living with that regret every single day." Ava shook her head, the pain in her chest growing stronger. "You're right. You don't deserve my forgiveness. After everything you put me through, I don't even know if I can look at you the same way." It was true. The anger she felt toward him was so deep, so overwhelming, that for a moment she couldn't breathe. Her mind kept flashing back to that day, the look in his eyes when he said those words, the way he had walked out of the church, leaving her standing there, humiliated and heartbroken. He had promised her forever. He had promised to stand by her side through everything. And then he left, without a word, without any explanation. It was one of the worst moments of her life. And now, 10 years later, he was standing before her, expecting everything to magically fall into place. "Why now, Michael?" she whispered, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "Why after all this time? Why didn't you come back sooner? Why didn't you reach out when I needed you the most?" Michael's face contorted with pain, his eyes filled with regret. "I was an idiot, Ava. I was terrified. I let fear guide my decisions, and it cost me everything. I convinced myself that I was protecting you from a future of pain, that I was doing the right thing by leaving." Ava stared at him in disbelief. "You left because you thought it was the right thing to do?" The bitterness in her voice was evident, and she didn't care. How could he say something like that after all the years of pain he had caused her? "Yes," Michael replied, his voice steady now, but full of an emotional weight that made her stomach churn. "But it was the worst decision I've ever made. I didn't realize until it was too late, until I saw you living your life, moving on without me, that I had made the biggest mistake of my life." The tears that had been threatening to fall finally spilled over. Ava could no longer hold them back. The floodgates opened, and she allowed herself to cry. Cry for the years she had lost, for the man who had broken her heart, for the love that was never meant to be. She looked away, wiping her tears hastily. "I don't know what you expect me to do, Michael. I don't know how to even look at you right now. You think just because you're sorry, everything is supposed to be okay? I don't expect anything, Ava. I don't deserve anything, but I need you to know that I'm not the same man who left you that day. I've changed, I've learned, I've grown." Ava shook her head, taking a step back from him. She was afraid that if she stayed any longer, she would let him in again. She would forgive him, and everything she had worked so hard to build would crumble. He had already destroyed her once, and she couldn't risk him doing it again. "I'm sorry, Michael," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't do this. I can't go back to that place. Not after everything." Michael's face fell, and for a moment Ava thought she saw something break inside him, something he had been holding on to for years. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her otherwise. He just nodded slowly, as if accepting her decision, though it was clear it was killing him inside. "I understand," he said softly. "But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the aisle of the store, leaving Ava standing there, her heart in pieces once again. The man she had once loved, the man who had left her with nothing but heartbreak, was gone once more. But this time she wasn't sure if she had the strength to pick up the pieces. The pain that had been buried for so long resurfaced, and Ava wondered if she would ever truly heal. Would she ever be able to trust again? Could she ever love again? Or was she doomed to live with the scars of a love that had never had a chance? But one thing was certain. Michael had left, and this time he wasn't coming back. Ava hadn't expected this, at least not like this. When Michael first left her, she had no idea how to move forward. It felt as though the world had collapsed around her. His abandonment didn't just hurt. It shattered her trust in everything she believed in. She thought she had known love. She thought she had built a future with someone who cherished her. But instead she was left standing in front of an empty altar, her heart broken, with the remnants of their dreams scattered on the cold floor. 10 years had passed. She had built a life, a good life, one that had taken years of rebuilding after the emotional rubble Michael had left behind. She focused on her career, poured everything into her work, and learned to love herself again. In the process, she became a stronger, more resilient person. But even as she stood at the top of her own life, achieving her goals, there were still times when she felt the echo of Michael's absence. Seeing him again after all these years was like reopening a wound she thought had long since healed. The initial rush of anger and betrayal had been overwhelming, but as she stood there facing the man who had broken her, she realized something. Michael wasn't the same man who had walked away from her so many years ago. Something had shifted in him. Something that wasn't immediately visible, but something Ava could sense. It was a strange thing to look at someone who had once meant everything to you and feel both the sting of the past and the confusion of the present. Ava was no longer that naive girl who had fallen so deeply in love with him. She had grown, she had evolved, and she had found peace in her own life. But in that moment, staring at him in the store, her heart ached in a way she wasn't prepared for. A part of her wanted to scream at him, to ask him why, to demand the answers she had been robbed of all those years ago. The other part of her, far quieter, more patient, just wanted to understand. What had happened to him? What had changed? Ava had spent so many nights trying to make sense of everything. She replayed the night of the wedding over and over in her head, trying to understand what went wrong. It wasn't just the shock of his leaving, it was the silence that followed. No explanation, no apology, just gone. She had to pick up the pieces of her broken heart and move on without him, but how could she forget the way he had looked at her? That day full of love and promises of forever. Now here he was, standing before her with regret in his eyes, apologizing for the past. But was it enough? Could she ever forgive him? Could she let herself fall for him again, knowing the pain he had caused her? As Michael stood in front of her, Ava's mind raced. Her instincts told her to walk away, to leave this chapter of her life closed and never open it again. But there was a small part of her, buried deep inside, that wondered if she had been too quick to shut the door on him. Was there a way forward? Or had the wounds of the past been too deep, too permanent? Michael, for his part, seemed desperate. He had been carrying this guilt for years. He was a man who had thought he was doing the right thing by leaving her. He had convinced himself that he was protecting her from a future of pain. But now, after everything, he realized just how wrong he had been. The weight of his mistake was clear in the lines of his face, in the way he couldn't seem to look her in the eye for too long. There was a vulnerability in him now that hadn't existed before. He was no longer the confident, self-assured man who had once walked away. He was a man broken by his own decisions, and that vulnerability affected her more than she cared to admit. She had spent years building a fortress around her heart, and yet, standing here with him, it felt like that fortress was crumbling. Ava didn't know what to feel. She didn't know if she should let him in, or if she should shut him out for good. But the truth was, she couldn't help but feel something. A part of her wanted to believe in the man standing before her, wanted to believe that he had changed. But then the rational side of her reminded her of everything he had done. She had been the one left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She had been the one to hold it all together when he had walked away without a second thought. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Michael. You hurt me in a way that—" "Stop." Michael's voice was firm but gentle, and he reached out as if to touch her arm but stopped himself. He was trying to give her space, but he wanted her to understand. I know you're angry, I know you hate me, and I don't blame you for it. I deserve that anger. But I need you to understand, I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped loving you. And I never, not for a single second, stopped regretting what I did. Ava shook her head, the floodgates of emotion opening even wider. Regret isn't enough, Michael. Do you think that after everything, a simple apology is going to make up for what you did? Michael's face twisted with guilt. I know nothing will make up for it. I know I can't take back what I did, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't expect it, but I need you to know that I'm sorry, that I was a fool. I didn't understand what I had until I lost it, until I lost you. For a moment there was silence. Ava closed her eyes, trying to collect herself. She had never wanted to be this vulnerable again. She had worked so hard to protect herself, to ensure that she would never be in a position where she would be hurt again. But now, standing here with Michael, it felt like everything she had worked for was being threatened. I didn't want to be the one to carry the weight of your decision, Ava said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I didn't ask for you to make that choice for me. You decided for both of us. You took my future and shattered it, and I had to find a way to rebuild it on my own. And I did. I built something for myself without you. I found happiness again. Michael. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was enough. I'm enough. Michael's eyes softened as he listened to her. I never meant to take that from you. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I only made everything worse. Ava looked at him, her heart aching. I'm not the same person I was before you left, Michael, and I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. For a moment, Michael said nothing. He just stood there, his eyes filled with a sorrow that Ava had never seen before. I know I can't undo the past. I know I can't go back and change what happened, but I want to be better for you, for me. And I want to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve. Ava stared at him, torn between the anger that had been her constant companion and the old feelings that were creeping back into her chest. Could she really let him back into her life? Was there a future for them? Or was it all too far gone? She didn't know the answer, and she wasn't sure she ever would. All she knew was that seeing him again, hearing him apologize with such raw honesty, was more difficult than she ever could have imagined. I don't know what to say to you, she whispered. Michael stepped closer, his voice soft and filled with emotion. You don't have to say anything, Ava. I don't expect you to forgive me, not yet. I just need you to know that I'm here, and I'll be here no matter what you decide. I'll wait for you if that's what it takes. Ava's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and uncertain. She didn't know what to do with them. She didn't know what to do with him. But there was one thing she knew for sure. Her heart, despite everything, was still attached to him in a way that scared her more than she was willing to admit. As she stood there facing the man who had once been the love of her life, Ava realized that this was the hardest decision she would ever make. Would she forgive him? Or would she walk away for good? Would she let him back into her life, knowing that it could all fall apart again? The choice was hers, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't know what the right answer was. The weeks that followed were a blur of confusion and tangled emotions. Ava had been carefully constructing a life without Michael for so long, yet the mere thought of him had a way of unearthing buried memories, causing her heart to race in unpredictable ways. She wanted to believe his transformation, to believe in the man who now stood before her, apologizing for the mistakes of the past. But every time she let her guard down, that sharp sting of betrayal returned, a haunting reminder of the man who had left her at the altar. Michael had tried everything to make amends, but Ava found herself unwilling to accept his efforts too quickly. She was strong now, had become someone who was more than the woman she had been when he had shattered her heart. She had carved a new path, one that no longer needed him, one that she had built from scratch. But the echo of their past together lingered. She couldn't shake the memories of their shared dreams, the plans they had made together, and the love that had once felt so pure. For years she had convinced herself that she was better off without him, that she didn't need to keep revisiting the wreckage he had left behind. But now, with him back in her life, everything seemed blurred, and Ava wasn't sure what to believe anymore. At times she resented him. At times she hated him. And yet there were moments, fleeting moments when she saw something in him, something that reminded her of the man she had once loved. Those moments were dangerous, though. They made her question everything. They made her wonder if she had been too quick to walk away. The house was quieter than usual, the hum of daily life muted by her endless thoughts. The twins who had brought so much joy into her life were growing up quickly. They were strong, independent, and had their own personalities developing in ways that amazed her every day. But they still didn't know the truth about their father. She had kept it from them, kept the wound of their abandonment hidden in a way that allowed her to protect them from the pain she herself had endured. They had asked about him over the years, wondering where he had gone, why he never came back, and what had happened to the man who had once been part of their lives. Ava had always lied to them, telling them that their father was too busy, that he lived far away, and that sometimes grown-ups couldn't stay together even when they still loved each other. But the truth was too painful, too raw to reveal. How could she explain to them that their father had chosen his family's wealth over them? That he had chosen to run away rather than face the life he had started with her? Now, with Michael reappearing and wanting to be a part of their lives, Ava found herself at a crossroads. What should she tell the boys? Should she let Michael back into their lives, even after everything he had done? Or was she just setting herself and them up for more pain? The days passed, and Ava tried to move on, to live her life as she always had. But there was a nagging sensation in the back of her mind that wouldn't go away. Michael had given her space, respected her boundaries, but every time she looked at him, her heart tightened in ways she couldn't control. She saw the remorse in his eyes, the way he seemed genuinely committed to being a better person. He had apologized not only to her but also to the twins in subtle ways, sending small gifts, helping out when she needed it, trying to be present without forcing anything. Still, she couldn't help but feel like she was teetering on the edge of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Ava stood in front of the window one afternoon, watching the rain streak down the glass. The world outside looked like it had been washed clean, but inside her heart was a battlefield. She wasn't sure if she was capable of forgiving Michael, not yet at least. She had made a life for herself without him, and she had done it well. The idea of allowing him back into her world felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. But what if he had really changed? What if this wasn't just an apology, but a genuine desire to make things right? She couldn't ignore the fact that he had been trying in ways she never thought he would. When they had first met, he had been arrogant, driven by his family's legacy and blinded by the idea of success at any cost. But now there was humility in his actions. It wasn't the same arrogant Michael she had known before. This man was different. But was it enough? The truth was she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if she could take that leap of faith again. The scars he had left on her heart were not easily forgotten. She couldn't just pretend that everything was okay, that their past didn't matter. It mattered. It mattered more than anything. She couldn't ignore the pain, couldn't erase the fear of him walking away again when things got tough. But then she remembered the way he had stood before her, vulnerable and honest, admitting his mistakes without hesitation. For a brief moment, she had seen the man she had once fallen in love with. But love was complicated, and time had a way of changing things, of shifting the foundation of what once felt like solid ground. Ava's mind swirled with questions. If she took him back into her life, would she be risking her heart all over again? And if she didn't, would she always wonder what could have been? She had spent 10 years building her walls, her fortress of solitude, to protect herself from the pain of loving him. Could she really tear them down, knowing the risk of getting hurt again? Could she allow her heart to be open to him again, after all the years of hurt and uncertainty? The storm outside seemed to mirror her inner turmoil. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Ava felt a strange calm wash over her. She had lived through the worst of it, hadn't she? She had survived the abandonment, the heartbreak, the years of loneliness. She had learned to be strong on her own. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in herself. And yet here she was on the precipice of something new. Something that could either be the beginning of a second chance or the end of everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. Ava glanced at the twins' photos on the mantel, their faces full of hope and innocence. They had no idea of the turmoil swirling around them. They didn't know about their father's betrayal, the pain their mother had carried for so long. She had protected them from it as any mother would. But now they were starting to ask questions. They were starting to see the cracks in her armor. And as much as she wanted to keep them safe from the past, She knew that one day they would have to understand the truth. But how could she tell them the truth? How could she explain the complexity of the emotions she was feeling? The doorbell rang, and for a brief moment Ava hesitated. She knew who it was. Michael had been trying to reach out, to talk, to show her that he was ready to be part of their lives again. He had been patient, respectful of her boundaries, but now it seemed like the moment had come. She couldn't keep putting it off. She couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. She took a deep breath and walked toward the door. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the doorknob. She didn't know what to expect when she opened that door, but she knew this was the moment that would define everything. Would she open her heart to him again? Would she let the past go and embrace a future with him? Or would she shut the door for good, closing the chapter on their story once and for all? As she opened the door, she found Michael standing there, just as she had left him all those years ago. But this time his expression was different. There was no arrogance, no self-assuredness. There was only the raw sincerity of a man who had lost everything and was now asking for another chance. "Ava," he said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance. Not just for me, but for us. For what we could still have together." Ava looked into his eyes, feeling a mixture of anger, pain, and something else. Something she hadn't expected. Hope. It was a dangerous feeling, a feeling that could bring both joy and destruction. But it was there, rising inside her despite everything. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "But maybe we can start with the truth." And with that, the door opened just a little bit wider. The quiet moments between them, where words seemed both inadequate and overwhelming, stretched out like a tangled thread, holding them in place. Ava stood at the threshold watching Michael, as if he were a stranger, yet somehow still the man she had once trusted with everything. The years between them had carved new lines into their faces, new scars on their hearts, but underneath it all, there was still something familiar in the way he looked at her, in the way he stood there, vulnerable and unsure. "Ava," Michael's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I know what I've done, and I know you might never forgive me, but I'm not asking for forgiveness just yet. I'm asking for a chance, for a moment where we can talk, really talk, about everything that's been left unsaid." The sincerity in his voice struck her, leaving her breathless. She had spent so many years guarding herself, convincing herself that she didn't need him, that his absence was better than the constant ache of having him around, knowing that he could leave again. And now here he was, standing in front of her, asking for a second chance. But was it even possible to start over? Could they really rebuild after everything that had happened? Ava closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on her. 10 years. A decade spent mourning a dream that had crumbled at her feet. 10 years of moving forward with the twins, of raising them alone, of learning to be strong in ways she never thought possible. But the moment Michael returned, everything she had fought to keep buried came flooding back. The hope, the anger, the betrayal. All of it threatened to rise to the surface, forcing her to confront feelings she had long since buried. "Why now, Michael?" She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why after all this time? Why come back when I finally learned to live without you?" His eyes softened, and for a moment she saw the man she had once loved, the man who had promised her a future. But then reality hit her again, and the memories of the wedding day, the day he had walked away, came crashing back. The image of him standing at the altar, cold and distant, unwilling to face the truth of their love, still haunted her. "I've been a coward, Ava," Michael confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "I ran because I was scared. Scared of not living up to expectations, scared of the future, scared of being vulnerable with you. But running away was the worst thing I could have done. It wasn't just about us, it was about me. I had to face the person I'd become before I could even think about making things right." Ava could feel the weight of his words, and for a moment, a flicker of something she couldn't quite identify, began to stir within her. She had wanted this. She had wanted him to come back, to apologize, to explain the things he had never said. But the wounds were deep and the scars ran so much deeper. Could she really let him back in, knowing the pain he had caused her? Could she trust him again? "You don't understand," Ava said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It wasn't just about you leaving me at the altar. It was everything that came after. The years of silence, the hurt, the unanswered questions. You left me to pick up the pieces of a life we had built together. I had to raise our boys alone without you, without any support. You didn't just break my heart, Michael. You broke the future we had planned. Michael's face tightened with guilt, and for a moment it seemed as though the weight of her words might break him. I know, he whispered, stepping closer, and I can't take that away. I can't change the past, and I won't ask you to forget what I've done. But I'm here now, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I can be the man you deserve. I've changed, Ava. I'm not the same person I was back then. Ava looked at him, her mind racing. She had always been the one to push forward, to move past the pain, to create a future for her children. But now she was faced with the man who had been both a dream and a nightmare in her life. She had built a life without him, a life that didn't need him to survive. And yet in this moment she realized how deeply his absence had affected her. She had carried the weight of their failed future on her shoulders for so long that she wasn't sure who she was without it. I've spent so many years hating you, she said, her voice breaking. I've told myself that I was better off without you. But the truth is, I've never really moved on. I've just built walls around the hurt. I've made myself believe that I didn't need you, that I didn't care. But seeing you now, hearing you say these things, it's all too much, Michael. I don't know if I can do this. Michael took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Ava. But I'm not asking for forgiveness today. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be a part of your life, a part of our sons' lives. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to give me the chance to make it right. The words hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge that neither of them was sure could hold their weight. Ava felt the pull of the past, the desire to hold on to the life they had almost built, but the fear of repeating the same mistakes kept her at a distance. Could she really trust him again? Could she open herself up to him after everything he had put her through? The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick with unresolved emotions. Ava's heart was pounding in her chest, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this was real, that Michael had changed. But every time she let her guard down, the fear of being hurt again threatened to swallow her whole. How could she risk her heart again? How could she risk her children's hearts? I don't know what to say, Ava admitted, her voice barely audible. I want to believe you, Michael, I really do. But I can't keep putting myself out there only to be left broken again. I can't do that to myself, and I can't do that to them. Michael's expression softened, and he took another step closer. I'm not asking for everything all at once. I know I've lost your trust, and I'm willing to earn it back piece by piece. All I'm asking for is the chance to be part of your life again, to be part of our sons' lives. Ava's heart wavered, torn between the woman she had become, the woman who had learned to stand on her own, and the woman who had once believed in the love she and Michael shared. She had built a life for herself, one that no longer relied on the man who had walked away. But now, with him standing in front of her, asking for a chance, she realized how much she had been holding on to the past. Let me show you, Michael continued, his voice filled with determination. Let me show you that I'm here for you. I'm here for our family. I won't give up. Not this time. I'm ready to fight for what we could still have. Ava felt the weight of his words settle over her like a blanket. She had spent so long trying to convince herself that she didn't need him, that she could raise their sons alone and never look back. But now, standing in front of him, she realized that part of her had never truly let go. Part of her still held onto the hope that one day they could have the life they had once dreamed of. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she said, her voice trembling. But I can't keep pretending that it doesn't matter. You matter, Michael. Our family matters. I just don't know if I'm strong enough to let you back in. Michael reached for her hand, his touch gentle and steady. We'll take it. One step at a time, Ava. No pressure, no rush. Just a chance to see if we can build something real this time. Ava hesitated, feeling the pull of the past and the uncertainty of the future. But as she looked into Michael's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in years, a glimmer of hope, a chance at redemption. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to see where the future could take them. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of that future. Okay, she whispered, the words leaving her lips with a quiet determination. Let's take it one step at a time. And with that, the door to their future, whatever it might be, slowly began to open. The days following Michael's encounter with the twins were a blur of conflicting emotions and unsettling questions that kept Ava awake at night. She had hoped that this meeting, this first glimpse into a potential future, would offer some sort of clarity, but it had instead left her with more doubts, more fears, and a gnawing sense of uncertainty. There was something about Michael, something undeniably powerful about his presence, that kept pulling her back into the past, making it harder to look forward with certainty. Ava found herself constantly replaying their conversation in her mind, dissecting every word, every apology he had offered. His sincerity had been evident, but was it enough? Could she allow him back into her life after all the pain he had caused? Could she really risk exposing her children to him again, to the possibility of more heartbreak? The weight of the past pressed heavily on her chest as she tried to navigate through her thoughts and emotions. Her heart ached as she thought of the twins. Ethan, always the more cautious of the two, had been reserved, his silence an unspoken question. He wasn't sure about this man, about the stranger who claimed to be his father. He wanted answers, not just reassurances. Ethan wasn't quick to trust, and Ava admired that about him. He had always been the one to read people carefully, to observe from a distance before letting anyone in. And for him, Michael was still a stranger, a shadow from a life that had only caused pain. Then there was Jacob. Sweet, trusting Jacob, the child who wore his heart on his sleeve, who believed in forgiveness and second chances. He had taken to Michael more easily, his openness both a blessing and a curse. Ava watched Jacob with a mixture of fear and sadness, knowing that his unguarded trust could easily be shattered, just as hers had been. But Ava couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope when she saw Jacob's willingness to forgive, his ability to give someone a chance even after all that had happened. It was a side of him that reminded her of the person she used to be, the person who once believed in love without reservation. But Ava knew better now. She had spent years building walls around her heart, creating a fortress that no one could penetrate. She had learned to live without Michael, to raise her children on her own, and while it hadn't been easy, it had made her stronger. She wasn't sure if she could allow herself to be vulnerable again, not when she had worked so hard to protect her family from the wounds of the past. Her children, as much as they loved Michael, deserved the truth. They deserved to know why their father had left and what it meant for them now. As the days went on, Ava threw herself into her work. The dance studio still needed her. Her students still depended on her, and despite the growing pressure, she kept everything moving. But there were moments when the weight of it all became too much. The constant balancing act between the past and the present, between her responsibilities as a mother and her personal pain, felt overwhelming. There were moments when Ava wanted to break down, to let the tears fall and release all the grief she had been holding in. But she couldn't. Not yet. She couldn't let herself fall apart. Not when her children needed her to be strong. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Ava found herself walking toward Grant Park, a place she had always gone to when she needed to think, to clear her mind. It was a familiar spot, a place where she had come to reflect and regroup during the hardest times of her life. The city lights twinkled on the water, casting long shadows on the ground. It was peaceful here. At least it used to be. But tonight, the peace felt fragile, as if the world around her was on the brink of unraveling. She leaned against the railing, her gaze lost in the rippling water below. The cool breeze swept through her hair, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside her. She heard footsteps behind her, and before she could turn around, a voice, Michael's voice, broke through the quiet. "Ava, can we talk?" Ava froze, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't expected to see him here, of all places, not after everything. But there he was, standing behind her, looking every bit as vulnerable and conflicted as she felt. She sighed, her fingers tightening around the railing. "What is there left to say, Michael? You've met the boys. You've apologized. What more do you want from me?" Michael took a step closer, his expression one of deep regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect anything from you except the chance to prove that I can be better, that I can be the father they deserve." Ava's breath caught in her throat. The words hit harder than she expected. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. She had heard him. She had felt the sincerity in his words. But did she have the strength to let him in again? After everything? "I don't know if I can trust you, Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You hurt me. You left me when I needed you the most. I spent 10 years rebuilding my life. rebuilding my heart. And now you want me to let you back in, to let you into my children's lives. Michael's gaze softened, and for a moment Ava could see the man he had been, the man she had once loved, the man who had promised her forever. But that man had left her, and all that remained was the hollow space he had left behind. I know I can't undo what I did. I know I can't take back the years I wasted. But I want to be here now. I want to be part of their lives, part of yours if you'll let me. I'll wait as long as it takes, but please, Ava. Let me prove to you that I can be the man you once saw in me. Ava's throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She could feel the walls around her heart start to crack, the familiar ache of longing rising up within her. But she wasn't ready. She couldn't afford to be. Not yet. What if it's too late? She asked softly. What if you can't fix what you broke? Michael's voice was steady, filled with the weight of his promise. Maybe I can't fix everything, but I can try. I can try to make up for the time I lost, for the mistakes I made. I'll prove it to you, Ava. I'll prove it to both of you. Just give me the chance. Ava turned away from him, her gaze locked on the dark waters below. She didn't want to feel this, didn't want to feel the vulnerability creeping in, threatening to overwhelm her. But it was there, undeniable and raw. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was about giving him the chance to show that he could be different. Maybe it was about taking that first step toward healing, even if it was a small one. I'll think about it, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I can't promise anything. Michael nodded, his expression a mixture of hope and relief. That's all I ask. And in that moment, as the night stretched on around them, Ava realized that maybe, just maybe, she could begin to let go of the anger. Maybe she could take that first step toward healing. But the journey she knew would be long, and the road would be far from easy. Weeks turned into months, and the journey that Ava had reluctantly embarked upon with Michael slowly began to unfold before her eyes. The days following her hesitant decision to give him a second chance were a mix of emotions she hadn't been prepared for. Hope and skepticism clashed within her, creating a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. Michael was doing everything he could to prove that he was different, that he was capable of being the man he had promised to be when they first met so many years ago. He was there. He was present in ways Ava hadn't expected. Michael showed up to Ethan and Jacob's soccer games, standing in the stands with a proud smile, cheering them on like any father would. He was there, offering to take on more responsibilities at the dance studio, working side by side with her in ways that felt strangely comforting. He wasn't just playing the role of a father for the twins. He was trying desperately to be someone Ava could rely on again. And for a fleeting moment, Ava allowed herself to imagine what it could be like, to picture a life where the family they once were could be rebuilt. But as each day passed, Ava's doubts grew like heavy clouds in the sky. She watched Michael closely, scrutinizing every move he made, looking for a crack in the armor he was presenting. She couldn't help herself. Every time he did something kind, every time he acted with sincerity, there was a part of her that hoped, and another part that feared. Could she truly trust him again? Could she allow the man who had broken her heart to re-enter her life and the lives of her children without the shadow of the past creeping in? Ava's heart was at war with itself, the man who had once been her. Everything had left her to carry the weight of the world alone. He had left her when she was at her most vulnerable, when she needed him the most. Now here he was again asking for another chance, and Ava didn't know how to reconcile the past with the present. Her mind often went back to the years she had spent raising Ethan and Jacob without him, the countless nights spent wondering what it would have been like if he had stayed, the days when she had dreamed of a family, a complete family, only to have it shattered by Michael's abandonment. It wasn't that she didn't see the effort Michael was making. She did. Every gesture, every step he took to re-enter their lives, she saw it, and it touched her in ways she couldn't fully understand. He wasn't perfect, and she wasn't expecting him to be. She just needed to know that the man he was now was truly someone who could be trusted, someone who wouldn't disappear the moment things got hard again. But what if the moment of truth came, and he couldn't live up to his promises? What if, after all this, he left again? One late afternoon, as Ava was closing up the dance studio, tidying up after a long day of teaching, her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. He had planned something special for her, he said. A surprise. At first, Ava was hesitant. After Everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if she could handle any more surprises, especially ones that might stir up emotions she wasn't ready to face. But curiosity got the best of her, as it always did. She agreed to meet him at the park, though she didn't quite know what to expect. When she arrived, she saw Michael standing by the same bench where they had first met all those years ago. But this time, there was something different. He wasn't alone. Ethan and Jacob were with him. They were both smiling, holding hands, looking so happy, so carefree. And as Ava looked at them, she realized something subtle but powerful. There was a lightness about them, a sense of ease that she hadn't seen in them before. They looked different somehow. Their faces radiated joy in a way that tugged at Ava's heart. It was as if they had found something they had been missing for so long. "Mom," Jacob said, his voice full of excitement and a hint of mischief. "We have something for you." Ava looked at Michael, who was standing beside the boys with a warm smile on his face. There was no tension in his posture, no uncertainty in his eyes. He was simply there, present, as though he had never left. His gaze met hers and he spoke softly, as if sharing a quiet, intimate moment with her. "I wanted to show you that I'm not just here for the boys," he said. "I'm here for you too. I know I can't make up for the past, but I want to start fresh. I want to build a future with you, one step at a time." Ava's breath caught in her chest. She had never expected to hear those words from him. They were the words she had dreamed of for so long, the words that had always seemed so distant. And now, here they were, floating in the air between them. Ava's eyes moved from Michael to the twins, their faces glowing with happiness. She had never seen them so at peace, so free from the worries that had once clouded their lives. Michael had made them feel safe again. And in that moment, she realized something profound. He had also made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Tears welled up in Ava's eyes as she looked at the family before her. A family she had never thought she could have again. She swallowed hard, trying to find the words to express the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Michael," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm ready to trust you, to let you back into our lives after everything that's happened. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give us a chance, give you a chance." Michael's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. Without hesitation, he took a step forward, reaching for her hands. His touch was warm, grounding. "That's all I need, Ava," he said softly. "A chance. We can take it slow together. No pressure. Just a new beginning." Ava's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, holding Michael's hands, feeling the weight of the moment. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility of a future with him. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to be perfect. But maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something beautiful, something real, something that would give her children the family they had always deserved. A family that was whole again. And perhaps for the first time in a long while, it would also give her the opportunity to heal, to let go of the past and move forward, step by step, with Michael by her side. As the wind gently stirred the leaves around them, Ava felt a spark of hope flicker deep inside her, a hope she had buried for so long. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in ages, she felt like she could face it, with Michael, with Ethan, and with Jacob walking beside her. The road ahead would be uncertain, but it was a road she was now willing to travel, together. As the story of Ava, Michael, and their children unfolds, it becomes clear that life is filled with second chances that are often difficult to accept, yet hold the potential for incredible transformation. Michael's return after a decade of absence was not an easy journey for Ava. The wounds of the past, the memories of betrayal, and the pain of raising their children alone had created an emotional wall that was hard to break. Michael had left her when she needed him the most, and no apology could erase the years she had spent rebuilding her life. However, what started as skepticism, fueled by past hurt, slowly transformed into something far more hopeful. Michael, though, filled with regret, never wavered in his commitment to prove that he was willing to do the work, to make amends, and to be present, not just for his children, but for Ava too. His actions spoke louder than words. Attending soccer games, helping with the dance studio, offering his support. He wasn't just apologizing for what he had done. He was showing her with each passing day that he wanted to be a part of their lives. Yet, despite his sincerity, Ava's heart remained guarded. She needed to see if this was real, if he had truly changed, or if he was just seeking redemption. Through their journey, Ava came to realize that forgiveness doesn't always come immediately. It is a process, a slow, painful, and sometimes hesitant one, but it is also one of the most powerful tools for healing. She was able to open her heart again, not because she forgot the past, but because she was willing to move forward with a man who had earned back her trust through consistent effort and vulnerability. Michael wasn't the man who left her 10 years ago. He was a man who had learned from his mistakes and was committed to proving that he could be a better father, partner, and person. The story teaches us that sometimes second chances are not just about reconciliation. They are about growth, forgiveness, and choosing to believe in the possibility of change. It reminds us that people can evolve and make amends, but that healing takes time. It also highlights the importance of understanding that the past does not have to define our future. When we are willing to forgive and give someone the chance to prove themselves, we are also opening the door to new beginnings, even in the face of past hurt. Lesson learned. The most profound lesson from Ava and Michael's story is that true healing comes from vulnerability and a willingness to embrace second chances. It is about allowing ourselves to be open to change, even when the scars of the past are still fresh. Whether in relationships, work, or personal growth, we all face moments where we must choose between holding on to old wounds or stepping forward into the unknown. In life, as in love, sometimes taking that first step, even when unsure, can lead to something beautiful and transformative. How to apply it in your life. In your own life, reflect on relationships or situations where you may be holding on to past pain or disappointment. Are there second chances that you could give, not just to others but also to yourself? Is there something or someone worth forgiving, even if it seems impossible? The power of moving forward lies in understanding that the past doesn't dictate the future, and sometimes the most significant step is simply choosing to take it. Quiz question. What is the most important lesson Ava learned from giving Michael a second chance? A. True love always comes back after time apart. B. Forgiveness and healing are a process that requires effort and vulnerability. Please comment with your answer, A or B, and feel free to share your thoughts on the story. What would you have done in Ava's position? We'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content and to support the creation of more exciting stories like this one.